Before we even get into the I want to mention that there are 122 million girls globally who are out of school, and therefore it is a really important mission that we need to kind of work on. With AI, without AI, but we just definitely need to work on it.
Welcome to Wise on Air, the show where we talk to the world's leading minds on the future of education. My name is Aurelio Amaral, and I'll be hosting the show today where we're going to explore a question: can AI reach out-of-school kids, particularly in the context of gender equity in education? We'll ask if AI will help close gaps, or if there are challenges that might actually put us in a situation that AI might even widen gaps that already exist. And to answer these questions, I'm thrilled to welcome here today our guest, Safeena Husain, the 2023 WISE Prize for Education Laureate. Safeena is the founder and board member of Educate Girls and is a leader in empowering girls in hard-to-access remote areas in India, with over 16 years of experience and a remarkable track record of enrolling more than 1 million girls in school. Safeena brings so many insights into the impact and efficacy of grassroots initiatives in education, and her work has not only helped improve enrollment, but also enhance learning outcomes for millions of children in India. So Safeena has also pioneered mechanisms to create more incentives to finance education. She created the first development impact bond in education. Thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to start first congratulating you again for receiving the WISE Prize for Education. And let me start by asking you to put in context the areas where you and Educate Girls operate. And then I'll dive into the more specific questions that we have for you.
Yes. Thank you, Aurelio. And before we even dive into the questions, I just want to say thank you to WISE for this incredible honor. And I have to say this is WISE 11, but I have been attending WISE since the first one. And I think I've been here like 10 out of the 11 WISE I have attended. So it's an incredible honor, and it's fabulous to be here with you today on this conversation. And I know you mentioned that the conversation, you wanted it to be about how AI can accelerate for out-of-school girls and out-of-school children. Before we even get into the I want to mention that there are 122 million girls globally who are out of school, and therefore it is a really important purpose and mission that we need to kind of work on. With AI, without AI, but we just definitely need to work on it.
Absolutely, and I echo that. And yesterday we were chatting about the magnitude. India on its own, it's a continent. Just one state, UP, is the size of my country, Brazil. So by just reaching a good number of out-of-school girls and children in those areas represent already a huge number globally as well. So I want to start by acknowledging that and asking you to really contextualize these remote villages where most of these out-of-school girls are.
Yeah.
And how the Educate Girls model work to help identify them and bring them back to school.
Yeah. The context in which out-of-school girls are, where you have explosions, large numbers of out-of-school girls, are in areas where there are 2 or 3 factors that intersect. One factor is poverty, another is patriarchy, which is basically social marginalization. And the third is where policy breaks down. So you think of like rural, remote, tribal areas. So even though there is a policy of free and compulsory education, but it's awareness and everything kind of weakens in very marginalized areas. And when those marginalized areas are combined with marginalized population, whether economic or social marginalization, you get this entire explosion of out-of-school girls. So this context is important to understand if you want to find out-of-school girls, right? So therefore, where do these geographies exist? So in India, we're looking at areas which are poorest and which are really remote, which is where the largest numbers will be. And traditionally, we've been going door to door and finding all the out of school girls. And we realized like it's a very tough job and it takes a lot of time and effort. Because, like I said, India has 700,000 villages, you know. So, yeah, and this is where AI kind of came in to help us sort of identify at speed where those clusters are, where we should intervene first.
Perfect. So yeah, if you could explain as well how this partnership with a tech company worked to really improve the mapping and targeting of out of school girls, and how that impacted the work that you guys are doing.
Yeah. And this is really interesting because we used to go door to door and, we would cover all the villages in a district. So district is like, you have a country and states and then states broken up into districts. So let's say, I'll give you an example. We were working in one of the sort of like over 90% tribal. So this district is very tribal, very remote, almost 800 villages. And when we conducted a door to door survey, like a census across all the villages in the district, we found that 80% of the out of school girls were actually in 30% of the villages. So imagine the time and effort of knocking on, hundreds and thousands of doors to realize that 30% of the villages is where the problem was really highly concentrated. And this was a pattern we were seeing repeated across all of our districts. And we would be so frustrated thinking, if only we knew which 30% of the villages to enter, we could have gone at speed, like, at much, much faster rate. So we partnered with ID Inside, who took our door-to-door survey data. They combined it with other publicly available data like the census data, the DICE data, all the sort of things, and then fed it into an algorithm and built this predictive model. It has been a journey. I wouldn't say that, everything happened on day one. First, we were able to rank the villages in a district where we could expect to find the highest or the lowest. Now, slowly, as they call it like what, taming the algorithm or whatever. But year on year, as you feed more and more data into it, now we're actually able to predict the exact number of girls we can expect to find in a village. Therefore, we're able to then build these operational clusters and saturate them at speed. So, give you an example of speed, in the first 10 years of our existence, in the old way that we were doing it, we covered around 400,000 out-of-school girls in terms of identifying and mobilization. Through this precision targeting approach, we were able to do 1 million in 5 years. So that's the sort of speed and scale that we could bring to the problem.
Perfect. And let me ask you about the challenges that AI hasn't solved or hasn't yet solved. So once you identify the villages where most out-of-school girls are, there's still the human element after that, right? Like knocking on doors and speaking to parents to really convince them and make them understand about the importance of enrolling their kids into school. Are there any ideas on how to also make this process accelerate and scale up? Or is it still something that, no, it requires a lot of like human capital, human brain, human heart to make it happen?
I think for us, definitely the finding of out-of-school girls, we were able to accelerate with AI. But we work in very remote areas where digital access is a huge issue. And if you're working on gender, we all know that the digital gender divide is massive. Even if there is a phone in the household, let's say in a village household, the girl getting access to it is absolutely at the last resort. So you cannot build for that today. You cannot, bring in and say AI or technology will solve those problems. Those are human problems that will have to be solved at a human agent or a human level. So, for example, and also in gender, right? How do you convince people? AI is not going to be able to convince people. So you can go door to door, you can find which door you need to knock on, but the eventual message has to be delivered by the human front end, right? By our Team Balika volunteers, by our own field staff. Convincing parents takes human stories and human connections and relationship building and trust building. And beyond that, I think even like working with the girls, when you have first generation learners, when you have very marginalized population, you can't just leave them with a tablet and be like, okay, problem will get solved. That doesn't happen with our own children. Our own children need a lot of love and attention, and they need their parents to sit with them, and they pick up, vocabulary from their parents and all of that. So I don't think that we can see that technology can solve all the problems of education. I think we have to pick and choose. It's like a tool. It's like a knife in the kitchen. You can use it for chopping, but can also like hurt your hand if you're not careful. And so it's a tool, and you just have to realize, like, where is this tool most appropriate? And in our context, I think finding and predicting these areas is where it's most appropriate. But I think in terms of human relationships and engagement, and gender, which is about building aspiration, confidence, support of all the gatekeepers around that girl, that has to stay non-technological.
Perfect. And you mentioned some biases and social norms that prevent girls from accessing opportunities in general. Do you see technology in some ways as a danger that could exacerbate some of these opportunities that girls don't access so much and could access even less?
Yeah. I mean, I think the data, and I think, women who are listening to this will also understand that just the way the real world can feel unsafe, the online world, the trolling, the bullying, the objectification, it follows the technological world, right? It's not like because it is the internet, we are now suddenly all, gender equal. So I think the big worry is that is all these artificial intelligence models that are based on the internet today and the information on the internet today, which is already biased against women, is just going to actually amplify. And how much is it going to amplify? In bank loans, how are algorithms looking at risk profiles of women versus, men? So these are all things that will impact women and girls deeply. So I don't think AI can be an answer, and especially for marginalized populations, especially from a gender lens, I really worry about technology.
Good. So you mentioned the responsible use of technology, the responsible use of data. I wanted to ask you, by working, with survey data, combining it with government data as well, like, what are the precautions that you and your team need to take to ensure, data protection? What also the challenges to make that happen, given that, you not always get standardized databases, and you need to also compromise on certain things. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to make best use of data in a responsible way, and how you'll be doing this.
Yeah. No, I mean, we have very, sort of high level experts even on our board, that because we take this data protection very, very, very seriously. So because we're handling community, we have a real responsibility and accountability. So making sure that you're compliant with all the laws, making sure that that data is, it's anonymized and it's not. So all of those steps have to be taken. And secondly, you cannot just land up at somebody's door and start asking for information. You cannot. So anything that we do is in partnership with the government. It is under an MOU with the government, because you have to follow the laws of the land in terms of doing this. And it is really critical. And I think even for smallest things, we really think about it, So, for example, we were so excited that we could predict these areas, and we were like, should we put it online? Maybe people will be able to use it. Maybe it could be a public good. And then we were like, oh my God, what if traffickers started targeting these particular areas, because they suddenly now know where to find, the most vulnerable girls? So you have to think about every single thing, because, we would have funders and supporters saying this should just be a public good. And we were like, no, be careful. Think about it, versus just rushing into things. So I think data is really to be handled with care.
Perfect. And going back to your point, you mentioned the relationship with governments, and one of Educate Girls' key strength is also the ability to build sustainable partnerships with governments and work together to ensure access to education for girls. Could you explain how the partnership building model starts? What are also the steps that need to be taken to ensure continuity, to ensure a durable solution in the long term?
Yeah. No, I think partnerships are absolutely critical. We are simply catalysts, right? And so we are catalysts between the community and the government. So essentially, one part of our model, which is led by community volunteers and is about community ownership and the community taking this purpose and this mission forward. The second is the government, where you're partnering on the existing policy, so the Right to Education Act, and actually sort of, wherever that act is not reaching, we are the sort of the catalyst to saying, okay, let's create the demand side based on where the supply side is. I think partnership with the government is absolutely, absolutely critical, because it's only with the community and with the government can we actually accelerate towards the sustainable development goals. You are not going to get there by building parallel delivery systems. The government already has a massive infrastructure. They've already built all the schools. The schools are free. There's a free midday meal. There are free textbooks. Our job is to really catalyze from the demand side and make sure that all of that is being utilized to its optimum and that those policies are reaching even the last girl.
Perfect. And do you see any specific differences when dealing with a specific local government versus the other, and what are also the measures that your team needs to take as well to cater to different regions and different stakeholders in every local government?
Yeah. No, I think you have to be, and this is a good nuance, because education is actually a state subject. So your model has to be flexible enough to work in different contexts and to work with the different state governments. So you cannot just take one overarching thing and saying this has to work everywhere. So with every state government, there is a nuance and there's a localization and a contextualization that needs to be added. And I think, and therefore, your teams have to be local. So 99% of our staff actually comes from the same villages, from the same districts, from the same states, because they understand the context, and therefore that helps with actually working with whether it's the village level institutions or district level or state level.
There's also a trust element to that as well, right?
Exactly. And you have to have that trust element, in today's world. You have to be able to, because with communities, if you don't have trust, you're not going to be able to do the work that you really want to do.
Good. We mentioned briefly your work also in innovating financing models for education, right? So I would like to hear a bit more about how you came up with the idea of the development impact bonds for education. We know it was very successful, but if you could share some lessons and also inspirations for other models that could emerge not just in India but globally as well.
Yeah. No, I think so. And thank you for this question, because I think a lot of people say, they think that the development impact bond is actually a fundraising tool, So this is a great question, because the reason we actually innovated around the development impact bond was actually because we were scaling so fast, right? We went from 50 to 500 villages to we went 5,000 villages. And I was really worried. I was like, are we having quality for that last girl? The minute you can't visit 5,000 villages, humanly not possible. So we were just really worried, saying, are we just replicating the model, or are we actually replicating the impact? And so the bond, which is a pay for performance, as a payment by results contract, was a great way to tie money to outcomes, to the actual result. And that's why we actually piloted, saying, so that if we were getting to even the millionth girl, we would know whether we were still having the same level of impact and the same quality of impact for her. And that's where the genesis really came. The second aspect was, I think, resources are limited. The problems are so large, resourcing is limited, and therefore an innovative financing mechanism where you can tie money to results means that you are getting results for your last dollar or last rupee. So I think that was the real idea behind the development impact bond, and it taught us an enormous amount in terms of how to work and performance management systems and what it takes to drive results. And I've forgotten the second part of your question.
How this model could work in other geographies, other contexts, and if you have examples of other successful models that were inspired, that would.
Yeah, actually, it has taken a life of its own. I think when we were piloting it, we thought, we were the only ones, and God knows where it will go and all the rest of it. But today there are over 227 or 250 odd development impact bonds in the world. and they are deploying close to $1 billion worth of capital. So there's an enormous amount of capital that's flowing through these instruments, and they're being used for everything from employment bonds or skilling bonds or healthcare. So there's no actual area where a bond is not being tried. So it's great. It's actually incredibly successful.
Amazing. And Safina, with this possibility for technology and AI specifically to accelerate even further your work in targeting out of school girls, for example, could this also transform the financing mechanisms as well, the time frames and the type of incentives that are given to the funders?
Yeah. I mean, I think these are real opportunities for donors because money is going to be limited. And with precision targeting, you can actually flow large amounts of capital. And you can do the precision targeting for a lot of different things, right? You can do it for out-of-school girls, but you can also do it for, let's say, malnutrition. You could do it for unemployment. You can do it for a host of causes. So I think there's great potential in being able to use these instruments because otherwise we're kind of like running in the dark, right? People are setting up projects saying, oh, I have my factory here, so I'll run a project here, or this is my geography, so I'll run a project here. But we have to accelerate money to areas of highest need. And I think AI can definitely help us in that.
Perfect. So I'd like to move now to your most recent part of work with Educate Girls, also focusing on older girls at the secondary high school level as well. So if you could comment on this journey of like first making sure that the young girls are in school and then this next step of ensuring continuity and building a full pathway for success, right?
Yeah. So, past 16 years, our work has been aligned with the Right to Education Act, which goes from grade 1 to 8. And now our girls are getting older because we're not that old an organization, right? So our girls have gone through like at the 8th grade, and now we're finding like there's not much pathway for them beyond the 8th because there's a limited number of secondary schools, or like a lot of so they don't have access, or girls, fail, let's say, one subject in the 9th or one subject in the 10th, and then they have no way of continuing their education. So currently in India, 57% of adolescent girls and young women will not complete secondary. Right? They will not even complete their 10th grade, which means they cannot get an entry-level job, which means they will have a hard time getting formal bank loans. There's so many opportunities that will be denied to them. So you cannot have, like for us, it was really important saying, how can our young women have access to opportunities? Because otherwise their exclusion continues. If you can't enter the formal economy, then all you'll do is daily wage labor and farm labor. So for them to have life chances, we wanted to make sure that they get their secondary credentials. Beyond that, we want to then link them to the opportunities, whether it is skilling, whether it is, employment or livelihood, or all the social protection schemes, bank accounts, financial inclusion, because it's only those choices that will actually give our women and girls a voice and agency. So it's really important that we feel that over the next 10 years, take it to its logical end to that journey and stand with the girls to make sure that they have agency.
Perfect. And what are the tools that you envision to also accelerate this this next phase? One thing is to ensure access, which is on its own a big challenge. But once you go through all steps of education, the challenges get somehow, I would say, more sophisticated, right? Like, so you have a whole new plethora of challenges for each pathway that a girl might choose in further studies, future professional opportunities. And for each of them, you need to think of specific tools and specific solutions. So I would be curious to also hear from you if there are plans to perhaps find, I don't know, say like a a magic solution. There are no magic solutions,
Yeah. But no, we'll get there. We will find a magic solution. So and these are all the things that we are still building and learning, and we are looking at talking to partners and people who've already cracked this in their sort of areas. So very excited to be here at Wise to be able to have a lot of those really rich conversations because everybody has a piece of the puzzle, right? But in terms of our work over the last couple of years, because this initiative's still new, what we've been doing is we've been finding out-of-school girls and then bringing them at the village level for just a 6-month village-based camp, which is facilitated by somebody from the village itself, like an educated person from the village. And we're running them through the 10th grade curriculum, basic foundational literacy, numeracy, building life skills, digital skills, an entire sort of package of intense services for 6 months, and then having them sit for the 10th grade exam through the open school system. And the results are about, a last cohort, I think 78% of our girls have passed. And these are girls, one girl, failed in the 9th, was out of school since 2018. So imagine 4 to 5 years she's been sitting at home. And today she attended this 6-month camp in her village for 3 hours a day. And today she's cleared her 10th grade. And I was talking to her and she's like, I'm actually now going to join nursing school. So I'm filling out my form and I'm going to go for this training and stuff. And you just suddenly see futures being unlocked with just the small intervention of 6 months, not a center-based, crack open the centers and bring it to their doorstep. And I think for girls, we have to also think about how do you deliver a lot of these things at the doorstep so that they can. So we're very excited. I think, the magic is coming. It's taking, and we'll get there.
Perfect. And speaking of magic, speaking of future, we're here today at the Wise 11 Summit, where we're hearing a lot of interesting ideas around the future of education. And I'd like to ask you which ideas you heard that you think, oh, these are promising, these might stick, and which are the ones that, perhaps might be just a buzz moment and might not stick at all. And I would just, if I may, ask you also to share your very first experience with technology in your career. You told me when we had our first call, I was very intrigued by, sometimes there are interesting ideas that startups come up with, but not all of them will become the next Googles and Facebooks. But so I would like to have your take on that from someone who has seen technology in the 90s emerging. And
you like revealing my age here. Technology in the 90s. Thank you very much. Netscape, anyone? So I'm going to reserve comment on which is the panel that I thought was really good and stuff, because I think I'm actually taking away some ideas or the other from every conversation. So I'm not. It's not fair for me to sit on John and like, oh, that idea was really crap. Like, this was really good because I'm from the 90s. I'm an old person. I should just reserve judgment. No, but really, and also the day is still young, and we still have a lot more conversations to listen to. But my first experience with technology, and that was my first job, was in the Silicon Valley with an internet startup. And hold your breath. They were making a 3D web browser in 1995. A 3D web browser, which we do not have to date. But at that time, we believed that we were going IPO in 18 months.
Some people could say the name today for that is Metaverse.
It's Metaverse, yeah. But it was a 3D web browser. And the conversations, over coffee would be that HTML is out, VRML is in. It was just this la la land. It was like a brilliant, sort of exciting, like anything is possible kind of a space. But I think it was very useful for me to have exposure to that world, to see how the tech people think and what is really possible, and which I think has really helped me, like in terms of accepting AI or looking at stuff. But I'm also a grassroots girl, so I'm very careful about what comes where. I'm not completely seduced by every tech idea to be like, oh my God, this is going to be the better than, sliced bread. That's not happening. Because when you sit at a village, right? You sit at a village and you realize that primary school doesn't even have electricity. And then you hear people saying, "Arey, let's just bring a laptop or let's just bring whatever." And you're like, please, like, let's get real. And so the standing instructions, I think, in our organizations are that you cannot design anything. If you have to design anything, you have to sit at ground zero and design it. Nothing gets designed at the head office. Nothing gets designed through meetings and whatever. The team sits on the ground in the village for a week, 10 days, whatever it is. Any tools, any formats, any survey instruments, everything has to be developed on ground zero, and nowhere else.
Thank you so much, Safeena, and it's a very powerful message. A technologist enthusiast, but at the same time, someone who knows that human hands and brains and hearts are key to provide the opportunities in education that we need for all vulnerable girls and children in India and globally as well.
Thank you for that articulate summary.
I actually learned that from your interview, so I'm borrowing words from you, Safeena. Quoting you. So I'd like to thank you again for this conversation. It's been a pleasure to be also personally involved in the selection process of the WISE Prize laureates. I learned a lot from you, from your work, from your team, and I'm sure the whole team at WISE also experienced the same. And it's been such a pleasure for us to host you over these days here in Doha to celebrate not just the prize, but to celebrate the achievements of your career. And this is just for us the nicest moment of our work, I would say.
Oh, thank you so much. You're very kind. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be here at WISE, as it is every single time. Thank you.
Thank you.